Hey there, just quickly, this video is actually part of a much larger video that I uploaded back in 2022. Heads up, there are some minor changes from that video, mostly that I don't score on a decimal point system anymore, so some numbers have since changed. Even so, here is the 11th Doctor's era, and let's get straight into it. So for Series 5, a brand new show team came in and basically replaced the old one, with Russell T Davies being replaced by Stephen Moffat, along with the producers also leaving and all the cast leaving as well. It allowed the show to basically be soft rebooted again after Series 1, and I think it has mixed results. I know that Series 5 online has gotten massive critical praise, and to some extent I agree with that. I think that it's good, but I don't think it's as great as everyone thinks. Overall, it's got some amazing stories, I'm not going to deny that. There's definitely some 9s in here, but a lot of the stories are also kind of average. Even so, I have to mention the amazing cast. Matt Smith plays the 11th Doctor so well straight away, with Karen Gillan playing a dark, kind of bitchy Amy Pond in this series that slowly starts to be a lot more loving throughout Series 6, but I still quite like her in this. And Arthur Darvill being Rory, on and off throughout the series, her Amy's partner, and River pops in because that's basically what River does during the Moffat era, and you're hearing no complaints from me. First up is the 11th hour, and this episode does have a very positive reception online, and you can sort of see why. A lot of the acting between Karen Gillan and Matt Smith is immediately so good. It's just a great combo of actors. Along with, of course, just setting up the relationship between the Doctor and Amy, it becomes very sweet with all the bits at the start of the episode, such as fish fingers and custard, which would kind of go on to be a phrase for the rest of Matt's era. As well as, of course, introducing Rory, who'd become a very important character down the line. And yeah, all that stuff is absolutely great. The issue with this episode is genuinely just the overall plot and Prisoner Zero. It's not bad, but it's just kind of standard, which is necessary for a character introduction. Overall, I've got to give this episode an 8 out of 10. It's great, but not perfect. For the second episode, we have The Beast Below, and it's got a few issues. First of all, I'd like to say I love the premise of this episode. The idea of basically the entire of the UK being on the back of a space whale after the world's destroyed. That's really cool to me. I like all that weird sci-fi stuff. I also love all the stuff with Amy and the Doctor bonding more and more, but everything else about the episode just doesn't hit for me. I'm not too fussed about like the Queen Elizabeth, whatever number she is, being hundreds of years old. It's just a detail that doesn't actually matter in the grand scheme of things. And all the choices of the robot people, it's just very boring, it's standard, and there's just not much to it, and the episode's pacing is so slow. You kind of forget most of the stuff after watching it, so it's got to be a 6 out of 10. Good concept, bad execution. Speaking of good concepts and bad executions, up next is Victory of the Daleks. Now, I love a Dalek. Big fan of Dalek stories, but this one, it just doesn't hit the mark very well. I will state that, like, all the stuff to do with the Daleks themselves, ignoring the goddamn, like, colour designs of the Paradigm Daleks, all that stuff's cool. Some of it's lifted straight from a 1960s serial called Power of the Daleks, but I'm fine with that. I like some references to Classic Who, so it amused me, but so much other things about the episode, like all the Churchill stuff, it's just very inaccurate. I mean, for example, please just Google Churchill and genocide, and yeah, not great. As well as just so many things like the Robot Man and the girl Dora Bella. Yes, the episode points it out, but it's still a stupid name. I like the idea that he does become human-ish towards the end, but there's so many good points as well. I have to give it another 6 out of 10. Up next is our first two-parter of the era with Time of the Angels and Flesh and Stone. Now, for me, I love it. It has angels being creepy as hell. It's basically like the Alien to Aliens comparison with this and Blink. I love the integration of the cracks in time, really stemming how important they will be. All the stuff with Amy and River, trying to figure out more about each other, despite the fact that River already knows Amy but can't say anything, that's really cool to me. And of course, the Doctor's relationship with both of them, really great. I'm shocked that this is actually Matt Smith and Karen Gillan's first episodes that they filmed. All the horror scenes are cool. I love the part where they're shooting at the angels to give a little bit of light every time they open fire on them. And Amy going blind is also really awesome. Honestly, my only real gripe with this episode has got to be the image of an angel becomes an angel. It does kind of counteract Blink, but apart from that, I honestly can't find as many faults as most people. I love this two-parter and I watch it so often. Now it's time for Vampires of Venice, and there's honestly not much to say. It's an average story, average supporting characters, weird comedy moments when people are dying, and overall the story's pretty crap at times. But for some reason I love this episode. It's one of those so awful it does go back to being entertaining to me. So much about this episode just doesn't work in a way that's kind of funny to watch. And yeah, there's honestly not much else to say about Vampires of Venice. It's just crap, but fun crap. I've got to give it a 5 out of 10 because it's just entertaining. Not good, but still fun in my opinion. For the next story, and the first one with Rory being a proper companion after Vampires of Venice where he was very sidelined, we have Amy's Choice, which is such a good concept. I love the idea of the Dream Lord basically being a darker version of the Doctor, and with the two timelines that they have to choose between, all that's really cool, with it ultimately coming down to Amy's choice of which one's real and which one isn't, with, spoiler alert, neither of them are real. That's what's so cool. Due to the fact that throughout the episode, all the characters keep saying that neither of them feel real or both of them feel real, it makes a lot more sense to have it be neither of them are, because then it just works a lot better. And the old people being alien things, it's so funny. It's dumb, but it's really funny. I also love all the stuff with Amy choosing Rory, but the issue for me that really drags down this episode is that car crash would not have caused their deaths. It's dumb and it really annoys me. Yes, the old people could have killed them afterwards, but it's always annoyed me. Even so, this is a great episode, 9 out of 10. Up next is Doctor Who and the Silurians. Oh, sorry, no, I read that wrong. It's for Hungry Earth and Cold Blood. So, bit of info for people who don't watch the classics. This two-parter is essentially a remake of Doctor Who and the Silurians, and it's just not good. I don't particularly like the supporting characters, especially the mum, and just so much of the episodes is just boring talking and melodrama, which is unnecessary. It honestly feels like this episode should have just been a single episode. Cut out all the fat, all the annoying bits, and it could have been a really decent single story. Because don't get me wrong, there are some positives. I like the kid Elia, I love the new Silurian design, I know I'm in the minority there. Our main three cast members are as amazing as always, and of course the ending of the second half, really shocking, really good, but everything else about the episodes just feels so bland. Now, I have to give it a 4 out of 10 in total because it's not truly bad, but it's definitely below average. Speaking of average episodes, we have Vincent and the Doctor, and I wonder how many people will know with that, and it was a joke, I pinky promise. This episode is brilliant. As someone who suffers from mental health issues myself, it's nice to see depression and stuff like that represented so well in such a high concept show like Doctor Who. None of it feels pandering, none of it feels like you're being talked down to, all of it is completely correct in the way it presents how difficult mental illness can be to deal with as both the person with it and the people surrounding them. And this episode reflects it so well with the monster that I'm shocked it's not been done before. And of course there's the part where they go to the museum, nothing changed, Amy's heartbroken, and of course the part where they go to the museum with Vincent. And honestly, that part is the thing that annoys me the most about this episode. The song, I think it's Coldplay, it just really takes you out of the moment. But yeah, still an amazing episode, a solid 9 out of 10. For our penultimate story, we have The Lodger, and when I was younger, I remember really disliking this episode. I've never really been a fan of James Corden, I don't think he's very funny. Rewatching it, I was surprisingly charmed by him in this. He's not acting like he usually would, there's no fat jokes every single 10 seconds, which is what most of his jokes are, which are annoying. And honestly, he plays quite a good character with Craig. And of course, Matt Smith is as great as always. I also really like the idea of it just being a normal story. Then everything gets screwed up in the third act. How did no one notice that this house gained another level? I know perception filter, before someone points it out, but perception filters do not work that way. It's established how they work. It's like you see things without fully seeing it, but people look straight at it. No one did that before when it was a single house. It's just, it really annoys me. It annoys me so much, but overall, it's still a fun story. I like all the stuff with Craig, so it's a 7 out of 10 for me. Time for the finale of Series 5 with the Pandorica Opens and the Big Bang. This episode is so good. So with all the characters, they're as great as always. No surprise there. I love the plot of this one, with the first half being like a mystery and then the second half basically being like the aftermath of a Doctor Who episode, which is really cool. I love all the stuff with River taking over like a whole Roman colony, which is just so in her character and very amusing to watch. Rory's return is absolutely heartbreaking and does make sense of the second half of the episode. I love the alliance of all the monsters, so entertaining. The ending is brilliant, how it ties around the rest of the series, and of course the ending where Amy invites the Doctor to her wedding and it all comes back. Such a good little ending. Yep. Great finale, 9 out of 10. I just wish that things were explained a little better. And that's Series 5. Overall, a good, but not exactly consistent series. And I think that's the biggest issue with it. Up now will be the ratings for each episode. And as you can see, there's a lot of disparity. But when we change it over to the rankings, it doesn't look too bad. Half of the episodes are really good, in my opinion. And we've got some good ones, some above average ones, and only one episode I don't like. So in order, we have Time of the Angels and Flesh and Stone at number 1. Number 2, Vincent and the Doctor. Number 3, The Pandorica Opens and the Big Bang. Number 4 being Amy's Choice. Number 5 being The 11th Hour. Number 6 being The Lodger. Number 7, Victory of the Daleks. Number 8, The Beast Below. Number 9, Vampires of Venice. And number 10, The Hungry Earth and Cold Blood, because, yeah, it's just not that great. So now, Series 5 has got a really good reception online, and as much as I agree with some parts of it, I have some issues with Series 5, and a lot of these issues were smoothed over for me in Series 6. Now, Series 6 does something that the show hasn't done for a long time, and is basically a very long serial with standalone episodes. If you watch the classic era, I honestly have very strong vibes to stuff like The Key to Time. It has a lot of that stuff to it because it's so connected, and I really do enjoy that aspect of this series. With only a few standalone episodes in the middle of the two halves, and yep, I'm gonna have to mention that this series was split into two halves, with A Christmas Carol being the special, and then The Impossible Astronaut all the way to A Good Man Goes to War being the first half of the series, and then Let's Kill Hitler all the way to The Wedding of River Song as the second half. It's weird, but I guess that we kind of had to do it for some reason. I'm not fully sure on the reasons. If you do know, please do let me know. But it's weird. I kind of like it though, and with that out of the way, there's only a couple of episodes I dislike, so let's head straight into it. For our first special of this era, we have A Christmas Carol, and it is literally just a retelling of the Dickens story A Christmas Carol. And it's fun. I love how much they play it with the sci-fi concept. I love how accurate it surprisingly is to the book at times, how much timey-wimey stuff's going around, and all the ghosts of Christmas past, Christmas present, Christmas future being like our main characters. That's fun. I really like that. I also really love the relationship throughout it between the Doctor and the two supporting characters. And yet, no, it's not as good as The Muppets. And I still can't believe that that is the best adaptation of the novel. But this is a strong second place. I do enjoy this special. It's very heartwarming, but at the same time goes very dark, which is good and what you need from these kind of specials. So it's an 8 out of 10 for me. For the first episode of Series 6, we have a brand new thing with it opening on a 2-parter. The story this time just is so good. I really enjoy the story of this one. There's so much mystery, so much intrigue. All the stuff with the silence is absolutely creepy and terrifying. I'm shocked they did not take off the way that the Weeping Angels did. When it comes to the plot itself as well, it is so enthralling. And of course, our main four with River joining the group once again. Brilliant. Canton Delaware III. I am shocked this character has not come back. He would have been so cool to have appeared in A Good Man Goes to War. I also love all the stuff with, of course, the Doctor's death, which sets up a lot of stuff down the line. And of course, the cliffhanger with the little girl regenerating, showing that the Doctor is not the last Time Lord anymore. Oh yes. My only real issues with it is that the pacing for the second half is very fast compared to the first half. But no, I love this 2-parter. It's a solid 9 out of 10 for me. Love it. Time for a pit stop, with the next story being Curse of a Black Spot, and this episode has got a very mixed reception online. A lot of people either love it or really hate it, and I don't feel either way towards it. I think the idea of the episode is really cool. I love me some pirate themes, and my issue with this episode is all the sci-fi stuff. I honestly feel like this should have almost been a mythical episode, something that introduces something new to Doctor Who. Still keep it sci-fi related, but the idea of like the other ship being trapped in this pocket universe in the exact same spot, the people who wrote this do know that ships move, right? Even when they're anchored, ships still move, currents are still a thing. How is the ship like always inside of the other one? I know it sounds like a minor pet peeve, but it really does take me out of the episode personally, and just so many of the supporting characters I don't like, so it's a 6 out of 10. It's still interesting, but just a bit of a miss for me. For our third story of this series, we have The Doctor's Wife, and this episode has critical acclaim for a goddamn reason. It is so good. Why did no one invite Neil Gaiman on earlier? I know that this episode was technically meant to be part of Series 5 and got pushed back, but goddamn, Neil Gaiman should have been writing Doctor Who from the start. He's a genius when it comes to this stuff. I can't even single out single moments from this episode because all of it is that good. All the stuff with the Doctor talking to the TARDIS, absolutely outstanding. Amy and Rory versus that father dude or whatever he's called, terrifying. Brilliantly done. All the stuff in the TARDIS where they go to the old set. So nostalgia baited, but I'm happy to have my nostalgia baited. The graveyard of TARDIS, the Doctor's rage towards House. That's it, House, not Father. I just can't get over how good it is. 10 out of 10. No questions. For our second 2-parter and last 2-parter of this series, surprisingly, we have The Rebel Flesh and The Almost People. I quite like it. I don't think it's great though. There's so many little issues. I like all the stuff with cloning. I think cloning is such a cool thing to play about with, especially with characters having to meet themselves. I love the setting, it's very gothic and horror-y, but so much of the episode's conflict just seems to be that there needs to be conflict. It doesn't feel organic in many places. I get that the Flesh don't like that they've melted down some of the Flesh people. That's fine, that makes sense to me. But I think on some level they know that they're not fully real. I know there's the denial concept, but it just doesn't seem very realistic to me that their first priority would be I must kill the original. And of course, the ending can't be ignored. It's a very significant ending that leads into the next one. But overall, it's a 7 out of 10 for me. Good, but not great. So, for the mid-season finale of Series 6, we have A Good Man Goes to War. And I love this episode. I love the concept behind it. I love how it's the Doctor's greatest moment, and then he falls very far down, absolutely distraught with all the things that he's accidentally caused. Now, I can't sing my praises enough for the concept of this episode and the execution being so good, However, the only negative I can find is that all the characters we meet, apart from the two from Kirsten the Black Spot, they're all new characters basically, and I don't care about them. Bring Jack into this episode. Bring Canton Delaware III from The Impossible Astronaut. There's just like so many little things that I think could have just made this episode a bit more impactful. But when it comes to the story and the characters themselves, all brilliant, absolutely love it. It's a 9 out of 10. So for the first episode of Series 6B, we have Let's Kill Hitler, or as the Harbour channel put, Let's Unalive Evil Bad Man, which I thought was absolutely brilliant. So yeah, this episode isn't great. It has some really cool moments in it, like for example, all the stuff with River is just really cool. I love all the Hello Benjamin jokes. Then we reach the issues of this episode, and it's all the stuff with Mel's. Why not introduce her in a previous episode if this was your plan all along? It just makes it seem so unnecessary. It's literally like, Doctor, have you seen our daughter recently? No, I have not. But the show is about to give us flashbacks to a character who we've never met before that's about to be introduced in this episode. I wonder who they'll be. It's not good. But like I said, all the stuff with River, Alex Kingston carries this episode so heavily, and I enjoy it so much. So it's a 7 out of 10. After 4 episodes that are very important to the overall series narrative, it was about time that we went back to a more standard, standalone story, and that's what Night Terrors does, but in my opinion it doesn't do it very well. This is another Mark Guy script, and as I've mentioned a few times before, I love his scripts normally, but this one just doesn't hit for me. I find it very dull, very boring, basically a retelling of Fear Her. However, most things are better than Fear Her, so it's not exactly singing high praises. And just so much of this episode I can't even remember. I love all the stuff with the dollhouse. I love the creepy dolls. Amy and Rory getting turned into dolls. All really cool. But all the stuff with that kid, oh my god, I can't stand him. He's such a bad actor, and I feel so sorry for the kid. No, not great. Not exactly awful, so I'm gonna have to give it a 5 out of 10 just for being bland. Up next is another standalone story with The Girl Who Waited. Now this one was double booked with Night Terrors, which is why it focuses very heavily on Amy and Rory, and god, what an episode. It's such a fun story, but also very heartbreaking. I love seeing adult Amy. All of that's really cool to me. All the stuff with the different worlds, with one of them being the Red Waterfall, etc., being taking place in different times. That's really cool. I love all that concept. I love future Amy hating the Doctor, and not particularly liking Rory, and all the stuff with Rory versus the Doctor. Really cool, but this episode is really massively dragged down by the start of it. You say, press the button, Rory. There's 2 buttons. What? And Amy goes for the one which is less convenient to touch? It's a bit contrived, honestly, and it does drag down the episode for me, but it's still great. It's still an 8 out of 10. Next up is The God Complex, which is another mostly standalone, but its ending does have very strong effects on the rest of Matt's era. God, this episode is just so good. I love the concept of like this sci-fi thing being an 80s hotel, a very boring 80s hotel as well, which just counteracts how weird things are. All the stuff with the rooms being your deepest, darkest fears. Really cool. Love the design of the Minotaur. All the supporting characters are amazing. That Muslim nurse, I am still heartbroken to this day she did not become a companion. I want to see so much more of her. This episode is brilliant. All the stuff with Amy's relationship with the Doctor basically being broken by him, absolutely outstanding. And the ending where they have to leave the TARDIS, despite the fact that there's still 2 more episodes to go. Shocking when I first watched it. Now, I love this one. The only issue for this one is, honestly, I feel it should have been a 2-part finale and tied in more to the events of the overall narrative, but still brilliant. 9 out of 10. Time for another pit stop episode, and this time we have closing time, and it's not great. It's another Craig one, and it's just bland. I have nothing to say about it. I love Cybermen stories most of the time, even the bad ones. But this one just doesn't hit for me. I find it dull. I find it very standard. I don't care all the stuff about his relationship to his kid, how you could stop a cyber conversion with love. But I have to state that once again, James Corden does do a great job at Craig. And all the stuff with Matt Smith being like as the Doctor in the shop, great. Stormageddon is so funny as a concept. It's just stupid. I love the Talk Baby thing coming back again. Yeah, it's like the episode almost should have just been a comedy with like a minor thing going on, but by shoehorning in the Cybermen and Cybermats, it makes it feel more important than it should, and that importance is just not very good. So it's got to be a 5 out of 10. So for Series 6's finale, we have The Wedding of River Song, and honestly, I find it quite disappointing, and I think I'm in the minority for that, but so much of this episode feels like a loose remake of the last series finale to me. I just don't enjoy it for that. Whilst the Big Bang had all of universe disintegrating into nothingness, this time it's all the universes combined together into one time period. And it's kind of crappy. I like the idea of seeing a bunch of characters that we've met, meeting, seeing each other in like these wrong time zones like Churchill. But so much of it, I just don't get it. I get that like time is broken, but time is broken multiple times in Doctor Who before, and it hasn't done this. I don't like this episode much until the ending. Now, when they kill Madame Kavarian onwards, all absolutely incredible. I love the twists, love all the stuff with Amy and Rory, so I'm giving it a 6 out of 10, mostly for the ending. And that's Series 6. Overall, I'd say it's an improvement on Series 5, even though it's not exactly great at points. So, up now is the list of my ratings, and as you can see, it's relatively consistent throughout the first half, whilst dipping up and down during the second. And when we change it over to the rankings like now, you can see that overall, I do like this series. It's just the last couple of episodes are a bit bland, as well as a few others just not hitting the way they should do. I'm still a big fan of Series 6, and I think it did do a lot of changes for the overall show, and yeah, I just really think it's a good overall series. Just a very disappointing end. It really should have gone through another draft or two, in my opinion, and if it did, this might have been the best series of the show, but it's not. And next up is a series which is definitely not the best series of the show. So, Series 7 is such a mixed bag. It makes Series 2 and 3 look absolutely golden. And I think the biggest issue with it is that it's basically two series in one, and that one is not very consistent. So for the second time, the series is split into two halves, with the first half focusing on Amy and Rory, and the second half focusing on new companion Clara. And it just doesn't gel well as a series. This is also the first time since the revival that every episode is standalone with no multi-part stories, which, in my opinion, also takes stuff away from the feel of the show. I'd have to say though, I do think that Jenna Coleman does a good job in this series as new companion Clara. I don't think she does the best job later on down the line, but for this one, she's a decent follow-up to Amy and Rory. And the first half is so weird. But with that said, let's do the special first and see where that takes us. First up is The Doctor, The Widow and the Wardrobe, and honestly, before rewatching it, I had basically no memories of this episode apart from the giant robot / wooden man bit. And yeah, on rewatch, I was pleasantly surprised actually. Yeah, I didn't expect this either, but it's actually a very charming episode. It's not great by any means, but I love all the stuff with the family, basically coming to terms with their dead dad, and the Doctor wanting to change that and make him feel better. All the stuff with the other universe is really cool to me. The tree people are also pretty neat. I think they're an awesome idea. Not realised fully well, but still pretty cool. And the overall performance of the supporting cast is really entertaining as well. Kid actors who can actually act is always a positive in my opinion. And yeah, the comedy in this episode actually made me chuckle quite a few times. It's not great, like I said, but it's a solid 7 out of 10. Now, for the first episode of the proper start of Series 7, we have Asylum of the Dalek. I actually really like this episode. I think it's solid. I love the story. I love the character interactions. All the stuff with Fake Clara is really cool to me as well. I love the design of the planet, bringing back all the old Daleks, seeing the giant, basically council of the Daleks. Really cool with them begging the Doctor for help. But there's an elephant in the room, and that's that the Daleks believe in purity. Why would they build an asylum of insane ones instead of just kill them like they do at the end of the episode? No, it's a giant problem with it, and personally I can overlook that. I know a lot of fans can't, and I completely understand that. But personally I can kind of overlook it and just see the episode for what it is. And I think it's a great episode apart from that. So it's an 8 out of 10 for me. But I can see this is definitely going to get me a lot of disagreements. For the second episode of the first bit of Series 7, we have dinosaurs in a spaceship, and I like the dinosaurs. I think they're really cool. I like all the stuff with Rory's dad, and all that stuff's really cool to me, and it really does elevate it. The rest of the episode, however, is some of the worst written, worst performed even from our main cast, and just horrifically designed concept ever. I honestly don't know how this one was made. Were they that desperate for scripts? Nothing about this works. The new supporting cast that are just brought into this episode and act like companions are terrible. I don't care about Nefertiti. I don't care about this horrifically sexist poacher. Why would the Doctor be friends with them? The villain is terrible. Their plan is just ha ha ha, I'm evil, and Unit is like ha ha ha, I blow up now. It's gotta be a 4 out of 10, and that is only that high because of Rory's dad. No joke. For our third episode in this little mini-series, we have A Town Called Mercy. And I think this is a great episode. I love a Western setting with sci-fi. I think sci-fi Western is just such a cool little look to it that's very unique to that subgenre. I love the idea of looking at the aftermath of the war, where someone at that time during the war would have be seen as a war hero, and now is seen as the war villain. I think it's cool, and it's something that happens quite a lot in modern day war as well. And I think it's cool to look at that kind of stuff. I love the Doctor's connection with both the experiment and the Professor. I think it's really cool to see how he relates to both of them and doesn't want to acknowledge that he does. Amy's also brilliant in this episode, as is Rory, and overall I think it's just really fun. I honestly wish that this was a 2-parter, because its pacing is very rushed, but it's still a great episode. It's an 8 out of 10 for me. For the fourth episode of Series 7, we have The Power of Three, and honestly, if I was rating this episode just on the first half an hour, basically until they find Cube Man, it would genuinely be a 9 out of 10. I love the comedy in this episode. I love the Doctor hating the fact that he doesn't know what's going on. I love all the stuff with Unit where they're basically trying to figure out the cubes, and so it's like, what if it's just a weird alien marketing campaign? Brill, seeing Amy and Rory's day-to-day lives, and obviously Rory's dad coming back, also really fun. And then it just goes downhill so aggressively, it kind of gives you whiplash. Cube Man is the worst villain of all time. What did all the hospital people with the weird faces mean? What did the girl who could, change colour mean? What does any of this mean? It means nothing, and the grand villain's plan is just to poison everyone with more cubes? It's awful, really bad ending. It's a 4 out of 10. And for the last episode of the first half of Series 7, we have The Angels Take Manhattan. Now, this episode is controversial because people are stupid and don't listen to words that are actually said in the episode. Now, everything about this episode is perfect. All the stuff with the main cast is brilliant. Amy and Rory's exit makes me cry every single time I watch it. River is brilliant throughout it. And yeah, do you know what? I'm going to acknowledge all the stuff with the Statue of Liberty. It is established in the episode multiple times if you actually listen to the dialogue, which is most of the episode, by the way, that the angels can manifest things into people's heads to make them think that something is there to keep them in the hotel. It's literally said out loud in the episode. Watch the episode and actually listen for crying out loud. But that ran over. Absolutely incredible episode. I adore it to pieces. It's a 10 out of 10. Time for a mid-series break now, and we have The Snowman, which is a Christmas special that rounded out the first half of Series 7, and honestly, it's a good time. You might have gathered by now, I am actually kind of a fan of the Christmas specials. I know not many of them are exactly great, but a lot of them are quite fun and good, whilst this one I would definitely argue is just a great story overall. Its Christmas setting isn't overly important, but it's also very relevant. I love all the stuff with the Paternoster gang, I love all the stuff with fake Clara. All that's really cool. I honestly prefer this version of Clara to the one we'd get in the main show. Bringing back the Great Intelligence is also a genius idea, and he's honestly very creepy throughout. I also love the nanny who turns into the creepy ice lady. That's awesome to me. That's the way to do it. It's something that me and my boyfriend quote each other all the time because it's funny. Honestly, my only real issue is that snowmen aren't scary, no matter how many teeth you put on them, and it does dampen the episode, but still a great episode, a solid 8 out of 10 for me. That leaves us to the first proper episode with Clara with the Bells of St. John. Now, this episode is definitely good, but it's not great. The episode's pacing is what completely ruins it, 'cause everything else about this episode is very enjoyable. I love all the Wi-Fi concepts, all the stuff to do with Clara and the Doctor being connected, all the stuff with the Great Intelligence starting to control reality in some places and basically taking over people's minds. The Doctor driving up the Shard is stupid, but in the way that I love it, the way that only Doctor Who could do it and make it entertaining. I also just really loved the overall idea of this episode. And then the pacing ruins it. Everything's really slow and then really fast. It's like you're constantly getting stalled on the M62 or something. There's no real flow to the episode, and it's one of those things that is going to become a very, very common theme throughout the second half of Series 7. So it's a 7 out of 10 from me. Up next is the Rings of Akaten, and it basically just is there to solidify Clara as a new companion, and personally, I don't like this episode. I like the idea of it, where it's basically sacrificing people. All that stuff I find really interesting and conceptually quite cool because it's happened in reality. Groups like this have existed. So seeing it happen in space with Doctor Who is something that I highly appreciate. And I also like the idea of the giant sun god being a big dickhead. But once again, pacing for this episode is horrific. All the stuff with the leaf is just so laughably stupid. I can't stop laughing every time I watch it. And honestly, the only real saving grace of this episode is, number one, that song. It is beautiful. I really do enjoy it. And of course, the 11th Doctor speech. It's my favourite Doctor speech of all time. And it elevates it to a solid 6 out of 10. Cold War's a 10 out of 10. Give me hate, bitches. Yeah, that's not a joke. I actually really love this episode. Yes, the pacing's a bit off, as is the rest of the second half of Series 7, but I think it's brilliant. It's essentially Alien, but taking place during the Cold War on a Russian submarine and with an ice warrior. I'm not gonna lie, if this episode had a different monster, apart from the Ice Warriors, it'd be an 8. But I love me an Ice Warrior. They're my favourite villain after the Daleks from the classic era. I love the Ice Warrior stories. So the fact that this is an episode I like, and it has an Ice Warrior in it, 10 out of 10. Fight me. I know I'm going to get so much hate for this, because so many people don't like this episode. But genuinely, Cold War is a 10 out of 10. After the hate comments I'm going to get for Cold War, the next episode after that is Hyde, and it's a good episode. It's not great, it's nothing really special, but I do love the idea of the pocket dimensions, something which a lot of the second era of the show would play with, which I really do enjoy. I like the supporting characters, even if they are a bit bland, but the thing for me that really elevates this episode is that there's no real villain. I love the idea that the monster that's in both the Pocket universe and the monster that's in our universe are actually just trying to find each other. It's almost like a weird love story. And I wish it expanded on that a bit more, but overall it's a cute concept and I do like it. I also like the haunted house feel. I like the twist that it's revealed that ghosts aren't real, as we'd know by this point anyway with Doctor Who. And no, it's a good episode, it just missed the mark on certain points, especially of its characters. So it's a 7 out of 10 for me. Speaking of missing the mark with characters, Journey to the Centre of the TARDIS is one of those episodes that I can really appreciate what it tried to do, more than what it actually achieved. First up, all the supporting characters are very dislikable. I don't care that they lived by the end of the episode. I don't like any of them. I wish they didn't. The only one I slightly care about is the android guy, but the other two are just horrible. I don't care what lessons they learn, because time was reset anyway, and this episode, honestly, to me, it feels like it was originally a two-parter. Most of the episode falls to the regular Doctor Who running up and down sleep corridors, and honestly, the only saving grace of this episode is all the stuff with the cool TARDIS globe things. I love that idea. I love when the Doctor and Clara go down into like the weird tree zone. Oh, that's cool. I love it so much. I just wish the rest of the episode was up to that standard. So it's a 6 out of 10 for me. Next up is The Crimson Horror, which is another Mark Gatiss story, and I know this episode has a very mixed reception online. I definitely fall into the love side. It's not great, but it is complete cheese. All the stuff with like the Doctor and Clara going up north. As someone who's from like the north, I'm up for some jokes and some jabs, and they are really good, really well placed, especially if Strax keeps saying the north over and over again. This episode isn't good, but it's so fun, you can't help but smile. Once again, the pacing is horrific. I don't know if I mentioned it from the last 3 episodes, but yeah, all got bad pacing too. But I can almost look past it because this episode is almost designed to be dreamlike and weird. So the bad pacing almost works in its favour with all like the different flash forwards, flashbacks. I really like this episode, but yeah, it's very clunky. So it's got to be an 8 out of 10. Now, speaking of clunky, we have Nightmare in Silver, and honestly, I think this episode gets a bad rap for reasons I don't fully understand. I love the idea of bringing Clara's babysitting kids with them for an adventure, because realistically they would probably find out because she wasn't being very secretive about it. I also love the idea of the Cybermen constantly upgrading. That's really cool. I'm shocked it's not been done before. It's a really logical next step to take them where they basically evolve as they die. I also love a lot of the supporting characters, especially Warwick Davis. I think he does a really good job as someone who's obviously pretending to be someone that they're not. I also love all the stuff with like the little group of characters who are all pretty useless soldiers. I always like the underdog story, so that one works really well. And all the stuff with the Doctor fighting the cyber controller with gold. So yeah, it's not a great episode, but it is also a very great episode. So for me, it's an 8 out of 10. Time for another disappointing finale, and this time we have The Name of the Doctor. Yeah, this episode is weird to me. It almost doesn't feel like it should be a series finale, and to some extent it's not, because the next 2 specials kinda serve that purpose. First, I'll just say that I love all the stuff with the Paternoster Gang. It's great to see the last time we see River Song chronologically, as I know she does come back in a couple more episodes, but chronologically, this is the death of her. This is the last time we see her in her timeline. It's really cool and really neat, and I love the explanation to Clara being the impossible girl, the Great Intelligence finally getting killed off once and for all, but there's just not much finality to this episode, and since it was a series finale, we have to treat it like that. I know there was 2 more episodes afterwards, but there's no finality. A lot of this episode is just very padding. It's just setting up the next 2. And I take strong issues with that. It's got to be a 7 out of 10 for those reasons, but it's not bad. So, minor spoiler, I am a big fan of multi-Doctor stories. I'm just a huge Doctor Who nerd, so anytime you put two of them together, I'm probably going to like it. Yes, I am that basic, and Day of the Doctor delivers, in my opinion. I love all the stuff with dealing with the aftermath of the Time War. We finally get to see the conclusion to that story arc. All the stuff with 10 and 11 bantering, absolutely brilliant, and John Hurt as the War Doctor is really good too. Clara and Unit are also very necessary to the episode, so they don't feel like they're just sidelined, which I also appreciate. I also like the fact that even though the Daleks are in it, they're not the main antagonists, and instead it's the Zygons coming back. Yeah, I love that. That's cool. I think that's a really good way to bring them back. The only real negative I have for this episode is I'm a big fan of Paul McGann. I love his audio stories, and I really do wish that he was there instead of John Hurt, as it would explain a lot of my issues with the next episode. Still, brilliant story, really fun, really sad at times. It's a 10 out of 10. Gotta be. Last up is Time of the Doctor, and this one's a mixed bag. I will say right now that the whole concept of this being the Doctor's last regeneration really doesn't make sense. We saw him trying to regenerate in Series 6, and just multiple times throughout other moments, it's never even been slightly established that this is the last body for the Doctor. That being said, the rest of the story is amazing. It's a huge roundup of the Matt Smith era, really brings together a lot of stuff from his previous 3 series. The regeneration also makes me cry, and I cry a lot at TV shows. It's a problem. But no, all the stuff with handles is also really cool. I love all the stuff with Clara. She does a really good job throughout the whole episode grounding it. And yeah, apart from the fact that the regeneration thing makes no sense in the grand scheme of things, I still like this episode. It's still an 8 out of 10, mostly for that regeneration. So yeah, that's Series 7, and it's a very mixed bag. As you can see right now, I've got all the ratings for each episode on, and it jumps up and down so much. It's like you're on a goddamn roller coaster. And when we change it over to the rankings, as you can see, it basically stays the same. We have a lot of very high-rated episodes, a lot of more mixed-related episodes, and then a couple of bad episodes. This series is just such a bland time. I think the lack of two-parters does play heavily into that, in my opinion, and I just don't find this one that great. Overall, I've still given it a higher rating than Series 5, but that's mostly due to the way that I just rank episodes compared to my opinions on the series. Because if it was that, Series 7 would definitely be at the bottom of this list at this point, because it's just structured so badly. But that's all she wrote for the 11th Doctor, and yeah, I still think it's pretty good overall. But next week, you're going to see one of my personal favourites with 12. Until then, toodles!